Hi, folks. This is Abel James, and thank you so much for joining us on Fat Burning Man, where we talk about real food and real results. So this episode of the show is with a personal friend, someone who I think has the very best name ever for a brain and learning expert. His name is Jim Kwik. And we're going to be talking about how you can tune up your brain on the spot in real time. Super cool show for you guys. Before we get there, I just wanted to give you a quick update from the road. We finally made it to the East Coast. Now we're in Florida, hanging out with the folks, drinking plenty of coffee, maybe a little bit of moonshine as well, picking on the old banjo tunes and howling old standards with mom and dad. Mom plays stand-up bass, dad plays the banjo, I play guitar and sing, so it's a grand old time. Allison's even learning the mandolin. But on the way, we got to stop at Paleo Effects, the biggest paleo conference in the world that I know of anyway. And man, has that gotten big. It's been so cool to meet you guys in person. I had the distinct pleasure of presenting with Rob Wolf and Mark Sisson, spending some quality time with those guys, as well as hosting masterminds on sustainability and also what it means to date and mate in the 21st century from an evolutionary perspective, what it means to be human. So that was super cool. If you were there, I hope you enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed meeting you guys, did a bunch of book signings and stuff like that. Along those lines, we are kind of like on tour of North America right now. So I'm going to be doing a bunch of book signings and speaking and hopefully meeting some more of you in person. So stay tuned to the newsletter. Best way to keep up to date is to go to fatburningman.com, sign up for the newsletter there, and then you can see if I'm coming to a town near you and hanging out in person. We even gave away some of Allison's cookies, which I dare say some people said were the best things they tried at the entire conference, which was such a compliment, not really to me, but more to Allison, who cooked them in the trailer. The chocolate cookies, they're essentially like coconut with some nuts in there and a little bit of chocolate. Just fantastic. So they're in my book, The Wild Diet, which is at bookstores everywhere. If you've already picked up a copy, I would be honored if you left a review. And if you haven't yet picked up a copy, please do. It's a wonderful way to support this show and make sure we can keep bringing this free information to you and plenty of recipes and awesome stuff as well. One final thing about Paleo Effects that was totally cool is they had an awards ceremony. And I'm humbled to say that Fat Burning Man, this podcast, won the Best Paleo Podcast Award at Paleo Effects. So that is all 100% thanks to you guys. So thank you for supporting this show, for sticking with me over 150 shows at this point. And it's just a pleasure to bring it to you guys. So thank you for your support. On that note, why don't we go straight into the review of the week? This review is for The Wild Diet, and Brett rates it 5 stars. He says, life-changing. I've been listening to Abel for over 2 years on his podcast, and I can honestly say he has changed my life. I was never overweight, but that's not what he's all about. He's about changing your lifestyle, about teaching you things about your body that you never knew existed. The people he interviews each bring their own philosophy, and it's great to hear something different. If you want to change your lifestyle, then this is the place to start. Buy the book, soak it in, then start listening to his podcast. So you're already doing the last thing, and I appreciate you listening. But go grab The Wild Diet if you're interested in what you hear on this show. It's got some kick-butt recipes in it, and we're getting some great feedback. And if I come to your town, I'll even sign it for you personally. Maybe even give you some cookies. All right, so on to the show with Jim Kwik. That is his real name, and he is a widely recognized world expert in speed reading, memory improvement, brain performance, and accelerated learning. For 2 decades, he has served as the mental coach to students and seniors, entrepreneurs and educators, and advisor to many of the world's leading CEOs and celebrities. We're going to be talking about how you can exercise your brain, how to build brain cells, and what it's like to meet all of the X-Men in person. All right, let's go hang out with Jim. Hi, folks. This is Abel, and I'm very excited to be here today with one of my good friends, Mr. Jim Kwik, who's a certified brainiac, has been on the set of X-Men, and has many other really awesome tidbits. But mostly, he'll make you almost as smart as he is. How's it going, Jim?
I'm doing good, Abel. How are you?
Awesome. I hope you like that intro.
Honestly, if I was any better, my name would be Abel James.
Touche.
I really do.
So, for those people who might not have heard of you because they're kind of coming from a different world, the health angle, we're going to talk today about brain health, and that's something that you've been experimenting with for a very long time. You do some really kind of novel things in the area. Let's give people just a quick background on who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is Jim Kwik. I with Quick Learning, and I help people learn quickly. That's what I do, man. The question I always get is about my last name. My last
Yeah,
name really is Kwik, Kwik,
I love
and
it.
with like Quick, my life and my destiny, you could say, was planned out. I had to be a runner back in school, which is not sure when it says Quick right on your shirt. I have to
Were
be
you
careful.
good?
Yeah, I can move. I'm more of a distance person, but
Yeah,
yeah, I be careful when I'm driving because the worst name to have on your license when you get
right.
pulled over for speeding is the name, because you're not going to talk your way out of that ticket. And I get to do my passion, my dharma,
Yeah,
is teaching people how to access their brain so they can accelerate learning, accelerate their thinking, read faster, improve their memory,
hmm
so faster, smarter, better, and just be the superhero that they know they can be.
that's rad. I'm totally making up this stat, but I remember reading years ago that if you're named Dennis, you're like 67% more likely to be a dentist,
Yeah.
and the names totally do that to you.
There's a lot of power in names,
Yeah,
and hopefully, after this session that we do together, this conversation, people will be better at remembering people's names.
yeah.
I think that's a big challenge for people when it comes to their memory.
Yeah, it
But
totally is. And we have a lot of health conferences coming up. We're going to be at Paleo Effects in Austin in just a few weeks. And I know that when you meet that barrage of people, especially as a speaker, which you do all the time, it's like, how do these people are unloading their life stories on you, and and they know you well because they've listened to you for a long time or seen you speak or something like that. How do you remember their names? What are the tricks?
yeah, so anyone who's listening to this or watching this, and they feel like I don't know, like their senior moments are coming a little bit early.
Hmm.
In people's 20s, they feel absent-minded, like they're taking a shower and they can't remember if they shampooed their hair. They end up doing it twice or something, or
Right,
misplace things, and their wallet, their purse, their cell phone, their car keys, or not their car keys, something larger like their car.
right.
You see the people in the parking lot trying to find where they park their car, but names is a big deal. So I'll just kind of give you my quick tips, if you will, KWIK tips on
Hit
just
it.
how to
Yeah.
hack your brain and learn anything faster. So there's three keys to a better memory. Anyone who wants to improve their memory and get better, I always tell them to focus on these three elements, and I call it MOM, MOM. And I like to use acronyms, kind of like back in school. We remember the
Sure.
Great Lakes, or the seven colors to the rainbow, if you will. Roy G. Biv. We have these mnemonic devices. So MOM. The first M in MOM stands for motivation, and this is really the key, I think, to learning. I had an opportunity to speak, and in the audience afterwards, this gentleman comes up to me. It's actually Bill Gates, and we were talking about the future of learning.
Yeah.
And I asked him, like, if he could have any one superpower, what would it be? And he looks at without even a pause. He says, the ability to read faster. I was like, wow,
Hmm.
I can really help with that.
Yeah.
And Warren Buffett has said that he's probably wasted 10 years of his life just reading slowly,
Hmm.
because leaders are readers. And I'm looking forward to getting my hands on The Wild Diet, by the way.
We'll shoot it right
And
out to you, man.
who if you could read a book a week and read 50 books anyway. But he says, we're talking about future education, and we're talking about learning, and we're talking about technology and convergence. But he said the thing that's really we don't understand is really motivation.
Hmm.
Motivation, like what's people's motive for action. So for example, if I want to remember someone's name, in the beginning, I would, I go in front of audiences, and I'll have 100 people stand up, and I'll have them share their name, and then I'll call them each by name. I'll do these kind of demonstrations, and I'll tell people, I don't do this to impress you. I do this to express to you what's really possible.
Right.
And because we can all do that. It's just that we bought into this myth, or we were told this lie, that our intelligence, our potential, our memory, if you were, is fixed, and
Hmm.
it's absolutely it's not fixed like your shoe size,
Yeah.
or maybe your height, if you will, and it can be actually trained. And so there's no such thing as a good or bad memory. There's just a trained memory and really an untrained memory. So first, motivation. So ask yourself, why do you want to remember the person's name? Because here's the thing. If you can't come up with one reason, you're not going to remember the person's name. You
Right.
know what I mean? Somebody had a suitcase here of $100,000 cash, $100,000 cash. If you just remember the name of the next stranger you meet, how many people are going to remember that person's name?
Right.
everybody,
Yeah.
right?
No
And
excuses.
yeah, and then, so they use no technique. It's just they decided that they wanted to, right? Because there's motivation there. So
Yeah.
always ask what's good for me. So maybe, I want to learn. I want to show this person respect. I want to make I want to practice these techniques. Whatever you want to think. I believe that there's a success formula. I call it H cube. It goes from your head to your heart to your hands. And if you ever learn something on a podcast or read it in a book, or you go to a conference and you didn't use it with your hands, you didn't apply it behaviorally, usually what's missing is that second H, which is your heart, the emotion, the energy emotion.
Right.
I had a martial arts instructor years ago say to me that you can't steer a parked car. You need fuel. And so what's the reason? Because always start with why. The O in mom is this, it's observation. Observation. And a lot of people, here's the thing, a lot of people, they're not forgetting the name. They're just not hearing the name to begin with. And so it's one of those things where, people blame their memory on their retention, but it has nothing to do with their retention.
Yeah.
It has everything to do with paying attention.
Right.
I have, I'm always role modeling. I've been doing this now. A lot of people don't know, but I grew up with learning challenges that stemmed from an early head injury. When I was 5 years old in kindergarten, I had a very bad accident, had head trauma. And from there on out, I felt like I was broken. I mean, I had no focus. I couldn't understand the things that teachers would tell me. I had no memory to speak of. It took me actually 2 full years to learn how to read. And it was really a private struggle that I had. And it made me just, really look at people and just saying like, why am I so different? Why is everyone doing so much better than me, even though I'm working harder than everybody else? And that really put me on a path. But when I got to college, in order to be able to keep up, I would just pull all-nighters, and I really wanted to make, show to the world or prove to my family and myself that I could do it.
Yeah.
And it got worse. And I sacrificed the things that are just good for me, sleep, eating well, working out, spending time with my friends. And I was just living at the library, and it's not very sustainable. So I ended up actually passing out in public. I fell down a flight of stairs in the library. I hit my head again, really bad concussion. I woke up 2 days later in the hospital. I was down to 117 pounds.
Wow.
And I was hooked up to these IVs. I was malnourished. And, I thought I died. And part of me, after struggling that long, kind of felt like, that I maybe wanted to, because it's just day in and day out, and so when I had that thought, I was like, what am I going to do? The nurse comes in with a mug of tea and had a picture of a pretty smart guy. It was Albert Einstein, the quintessential genius, if you will. And had a quote that you've heard a million times in different iterations. It said, the same level of thinking that's created the problem, it won't solve the problem. You think about ask a new question. It's like, what's my challenge here? And it was like, well, I'm a really slow learner. And I was like, how do I get better at this? It's just, maybe I can learn how to learn.
Yeah.
Learning to learn. And I thought about, well, maybe I could learn how to learn in school. And then I started looking at a course bulletin, with all the classes and everything. And I saw all these classes on what to learn: math, history, science, Spanish, but there were 0 classes on how to learn.
It's so true. Yeah.
On how to think, on how to focus and concentrate, on how to be creative, on how to listen, on how to pay attention, on how to read faster, on how to remember things. When we're talking about memory, I always thought that it should have been the 4th R in school. Remember, the 3 R's was reading, writing, arithmetic. But what about retention, recall, remembering? Because Socrates says there is no learning without remembering. And so when I left that hospital bed, I put my schoolwork aside, and I just really focused on learning. I wanted to learn how to learn. This big riddle that I wanted to solve was, how does my brain work so I can work my brain? How does your memory work so we can work our memories better, right? It's unbelievable supercomputer, but it doesn't come with an owner's manual.
No.
And when I started studying these things, after 30 or 60 days of just studying adult learning theory and neuroscience and multiple intelligence, just anything on how we work, I just, like a light switch went on, and I just started to understand things, and I started to read faster. I started having this like laser concentration and focus and getting things done, and it transformed, everything. And so, but really where the body of work that I teach, over the past 2 decades, it has everything to do with reading. A lot of people know I read a book a day. It also comes from research, which I know you're always learning. I find that I get to work with some amazing individuals, CEOs and actors and high performers
Mm-hmm.
in all industries. I noticed the commonality between all these, they love learning.
Yeah.
They have this curiosity, this thirst for constant growth, and constant development and enhancement. But the third area, besides reading and research, is role modeling. Every time I see someone perform at a high level, you could see somebody do something incredible and say, "Wow, that person's really great," and walk away. Or you say, "That person's really great. How do they do that?"
Yeah.
Because I always find that there's a method behind the magic.
Of course.
It's a method. When people see me on stage, I'll memorize everyone's name or long words or 100-digit number that they randomly give me. There's a method behind it, and that's what I wanted to seek.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking on role modeling for observation, for remembering names, one of the individuals who are absolutely astonishing on remembering names is President Bill Clinton. I mean, he is amazing. Every time I've had the opportunity and the pleasure to be able to be in his presence and to meet him and to be with him, he remembers your name. He remembers the people close to you. He remembers what you're all about. And, I always, the first time I met him, I was like, how do you do that? What memory tips do you use? He's like, I don't use any memory tips.
Yeah.
And then after asking him a number of questions, I find, he has these stories about growing up, and his grandfather would tell these stories, in Arkansas to the children. And afterwards, though, he would quiz every single one of them to see if they're paying attention, if they were really listening.
Yeah.
And he has this thing about him. Everyone knows he has charisma and a connection, and he's got an unbelievable, communicator. But here's the thing: this powerful presence that he has. I think his memory and his powerful presence comes from being powerfully present.
Yeah.
What I mean, that his powerful presence comes from being powerfully present. Because when you're talking to the man, it's like no one else exists. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I be in a room with 2,000 other people who are more important than I am, and yet when he's speaking with you, he's like right there.
Yeah.
He's not looking over your shoulder. But how many times are we guilty when we're out at conferences or speaking or we're at a wedding or whatever, you're talking to someone and you're looking over their shoulder.
Right.
You're
There's coffee over there.
We get distracted, or if we don't get distracted visually, in our environment, we distract ourselves internally. We start talking to ourselves. I find one of the biggest challenges in communication, and I'll relate this to health also, is that we're not really listening. We're actually in our minds when we're talking to someone, we're thinking about how we're going to respond.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of my favorite books, growing up was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People,
Mm-hmm.
right? Stephen Covey.
Classic.
One of those habits, yeah, absolutely. One of those habits is first seek to understand, then to be understood. And a lot of us aren't doing that. We're not even listening, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the word listen and you scramble the letters, it actually becomes another word. It becomes the word silent.
Mm.
And so O in mom, or when it has to do with your memory, O is observation, paying attention. And then finally the last letter M in mom is the mechanics. These are the tools, the techniques, the strategies, the brain hacks, if you will, on how to remember language, how to give a speech without notes, how to remember numbers, PIN numbers, passcodes, jokes.
I like
names,
that that's the last one, because most people would put that first, right?
Right. And I think also, I really do believe that when we're talking Pareto's principle and 80% of success, I really think that 80-20, I think it's that inner game,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
the psychology of it that really underlines a lot of achievement. So
And it's your beliefs too, right? I remember, so I studied brain science and psychology at Dartmouth, and I was fascinated by, we were lucky enough to have an fMRI machine when I was there, which was like unprecedented at the time. So I went in there as much as I could, mostly because I was broke and needed, $75 for a few hours of my time or whatever. But there was this one study that I did, and I started out hopeless, because like they told me, I sit down and they're just like, okay, you need to remember 200 names in like 10 minutes or something like that. And then they would just flash these pictures of people. And at the beginning, I'm just like, how is that possible? And they're just like, well, the more names you remember, the more we'll pay you. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I went through all of those, first the attention stuff, because that's obviously the most important. And then the mechanics, basically making things as grotesque or as unusual as you could with someone's face, and kind of like making their name flow through it, or do something visual and movement oriented. And that stuff was kind of helpful. But mostly, more than anything else, I wound up I think getting the highest score in the thing and actually getting quite a bit of money for this, because I realized that it was possible. And that was like my biggest block, right? At the beginning, it's like, oh, no way I could remember 200 people's names in that amount of time. But if that's true, then you're not going to, right? So I think something that's really important that you do when you go up on stage, it is magic. Like I've seen you do it a few times where you're just rattling off dozens and dozens of numbers, seemingly out of nowhere. Remembering everyone's name, and I think just showing people that that's possible is something that allows them to leap to the next level, because it is. So having been in this field for decades, what are some of the things that have broken your belief systems, things that you might not have thought possible as in regards to the human brain or corrections in behavior or whatever else you've seen?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always looking like you at those outliers, people who are just like off the grid,
Yeah.
When you wouldn't expect it to be. And so I love that you address belief, because it doesn't just take the mechanics. You have, all behavior is belief driven. And powerful examples, throughout. When we talk about memory, new achievements is like, back in 1954, Roger Bannister, he's famous for breaking the 4-minute mile, right? Throughout human history, no one could run a mile in less than 4 minutes, because the belief back then was that you would die. If you ran a mile in less than 4 minutes, your heart would explode in your chest. And that, you wonder why people didn't run a 4-minute mile if that was the belief.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, he did it through this series of obviously physical training, but also did mental training. If you saw, different specials on him, he would actually visualize himself crossing the finish line and seeing it says like 3:59, because he knew what all leaders know, like what you know and what your listeners know, that success is an inside-out process.
Yeah.
They take the invisible here and they make it visible out there first. Right. And so it shook it up. And so what was interesting is after that, no one could do it for like 1,000 years. All of a sudden, one person does it. What happens after that?
Everyone does it.
Everyone does it. And there's no, the next couple of years, dozens of people start doing it. And there's no big advancement in shoe technology or training systems or supplementation. It was a shakeup of belief, a limitation. And so early on, when it comes to my memory, an early influence that shook up my belief was when I was 8 years old. We were at a family reunion on a busy Saturday night dinner, and there's about 25 of us. And then the waitress comes, takes everyone's order, typical. But when she got halfway through, she got to me. I noticed something funny. She wasn't writing it down. Have you ever had like a waiter or a waitress like this before?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, there's no way, because I'm naturally very skeptical, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, it's a busy Saturday night. She has all these other tables and 25 orders. We're gonna have to trade plates. We're gonna have to send stuff back. She's gonna get this all wrong. But when she came back, she got every single thing perfect. Wow. I mean, what we wanted to drink, the salad dressings, the appetizers, how we wanted the meal cooked, the desserts. I mean, now, is that a standout skill or is that a standout skill?
That's rocking.
She was my Roger Bannister.
Yeah.
She shook up in my mind a limiting belief that I didn't even realize I didn't have, that I had, saying that, that more is possible. Right. And so that's what it kind of opened me up for more in the future,
Yeah.
So when it comes to remembering names, when we're talking about mechanics, we went through MOM, motivation, observation, mechanics. I always tell people 7 quick tips on how to remember names, right? These are the mechanics parts.
Yeah.
And I call it be suave. Be suave. And just know, next time you're at a conference, you're out there or at a wedding or just on the street, you checking yourself in the mirror, your makeup, your clothing, whatever, say to yourself, I want to be suave. The B stands for believe. Believe you can, believe you can't. Either way, you're right. Functionally, what it means is get rid of the negative self-talk, right? Because I remember I was preparing for a marathon, and there was one chapter in the book. It was psychology of it, and it said this verbatim, because I'm a memory expert. It says, your brain is like a supercomputer, and your self-talk is the program it will run. So if you tell yourself you are not good with names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your computer not to. Because here's the thing. Get rid of the negative self-talk. I'm horrible with names. My memory's so bad. If I don't write my grocery list in triplicates, I'll forget it. All that keeps you from your greatness, right? And because here's the thing, your self-talk, when it comes to it, your mind is always eavesdropping on your self-talk, right? So that's,
I like that.
Fill it with the good stuff. Yeah. That's the tweetable. Yeah. And at Jim Kwik.
Nice.
The E in suave, be suave, is exercise. And no, it's just two parts. Physical exercise, which people who are more physically active will do better on mental acuity. They'll have better focus. They'll have the better memory tests, right? And basically anything good for your heart is great for your head. But I also mean practice, exercise, practice, because practice makes progress, right? Practice makes permanent, right? And so, the bad news is it takes a little effort. The good news, it doesn't take as much as you think. And you can practice with things like names all the time. You just out there at the grocery store, you walk into Whole Foods, you're like, that's Sue, that's Mary, that's Bob. Just make up names. And when I would check out, I'd be like, oh, the same people are checking out. Who's that? Oh, that was Bob. That's Mary. That's Sue.
Cool.
Right. And so I'm testing myself. I'm exercising, practice, and it takes about 21, 30 days or so. And then it's something you just do naturally, right? Suave, the S in suave, you say the name. You meet someone, get their name, you say it right away. Right. So Abel, it's nice to meet you. So it means you also heard it correctly. The you is use it. Use it in the context 3 or 4 times in the context of the conversation. You don't want to abuse it. Abel, thanks for this podcast. Abel, what do you want to talk about today? Abel, that would be an abuse. The A in suave means ask. And this is a big one. Sometimes you meet somebody and their name is different. It's not a name you've heard before, right? And so you could ask someone about their name because that's everyone's favorite subject. You could ask, what can you ask? How do you spell it? Where is it from? What does it mean? And people love this. They get lit up. I was training at the country's largest life insurance company, 100 or so people, training director off to the side. Her name was Nankita. And I was like, wow, that's really beautiful. How do you spell it? Where's it from? What does it mean? And I said, what does it mean in front of her coworkers? And she paused and she looked around and she says, it means graceful falling waters. Wow. I was like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then it's on the audience's reaction. I was like, how long have you worked here, Nikita? And she was like, 4 years. I was like, with these people? Yeah, a lot of them are my friends or my wedding. I was like, that's great. Raise your hand if you knew that's what Nikita's name meant. And out of 100 plus people, not one person raised their hand.
Wow.
But think about the emotion and the value people put in names. They say a name is the sweetest sound to a person's ears, right? Especially if you're an entrepreneur or you're wearing that, the business development hat. It's really hard to show someone you're going to care for their future or their family or their health if you don't care enough just to remember their name.
And it's so much better than talking about the weather, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And
it's so funny because I grew up I loved NPR, listening to Car Talk with my dad. And if you listen to those shows, and you can still hear them everywhere, it's amazing. They did so many of those. But the first 5 minutes of the conversation has nothing to do with cars usually. It's all about the person's name, where they're from, what their heritage is, who they are. And I think a name is such a wasted opportunity for most people. They're just like, oh, hey, Bob, what's going on? And they never even think about his name might not even be Bob, right?
And people use techniques like that. They're like, they forget someone's name in their social situation. They don't know what to do. And they're like, oh, yeah, how do you spell your name again? And they say, B-O-B.
Right.
Sometimes that's a fail, really bad. But it happens. It's one of those things where, how do you make things better? You use it and you ask about a person's name, and and the name is so emotional. It's like one of the first words you learn how to say. It's like one of the first words you learn how to spell, and how much love were you given, encouragement. That's all associated with the name. Finally, after the A is the V, which is visualize. And these are the little memory techniques. We tend to remember things we see more than things that we hear, right? You tend to see someone and say, I remember your face, but I forgot your name. You never go to someone and say the opposite. You never go to someone and say, hey, I remember your name, but I forgot your face. People tend to remember what they see. There's a Chinese proverb, Abel, that actually goes, what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. And what I do, I understand. What I hear, I forget. I heard the name, I forgot the name. What I see, I remember. I saw your face. I remember your face. And what I do, going back to exercise and practice, I understand, right? Yeah. So visualizing means if you tend to remember what you see, give yourselves a little visual cue to help you remember better. So a person's name is Mike. Imagine in a split second them jumping on the table and singing karaoke on a microphone, right? Yeah. Something that people say that's very childish, but who are the fastest learners ever? Right. Children, right? They learn so rapidly, and they make fun of people's names, right? You have a very unique name also.
Abel the Table. It was hard for them to make fun of it though, because there aren't that many good ones, right? It's like, oh, Abel the Table, Abel, and it was so that never really worked until I went to college and I was in a group. And one of the dudes, it was just like, without missing a beat, he heard my name and he's just like, so if we got rid of you, this group would be disabled. And I was like, that's pretty good.
And then those kind of things, we do, even as children, we make fun because it helps us to learn and remember. So person's name is Carol, you imagine them Christmas caroling. A person's name is Mary. Imagine being someone named Mary and just seeing two lambs underneath her arms.
Yeah.
And it takes a split second, but you'll remember it. Person's name is John. You could picture, whatever. And finally, the E is swab. The E in swab is end. Just a quick tip is if you could walk into a room and meet 15, 20 strangers and leave saying goodbye, end saying goodbye to every single person by name, who are they all going to remember? They're all going to remember us, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a standout skill. If there's one skill to master, business etiquette, networking skill by far, it's the ability to remember someone's name.
Yeah. Cool. Let me ask you a weird question, because you have this beautiful picture of Iron Man behind you. For those of you who aren't watching video, we were talking before the call about you meeting one of my heroes, Patrick Stewart, and other people from the X-Men. If we follow, breaking our belief systems about what's possible for a few decades or a few hundred years, and people really start applying what you've learned as it relates to learning, where do you think we can go with all of this? What might be possible in the future in terms of human comprehension and power?
I'm excited about that, because that's the thing that I'm really excited about. Because a lot of sometimes what we're doing is we're just more remedial. It's like unlearning bad habits that we picked up as a kid. But what I'm really excited about, the work that we do, we have programs in 150 countries online, is the evolutionary work, the transformative, the transcending. And I really think that's what it is, transcending, ending the trance that we're not good enough, that we're not smart enough, that we're not strong enough. And part of that is, being an example for it. So, I'm here at my home. It's kind of termed it's Superhero U headquarters, and it's kind of like all biohacked out.
Yeah,
you have
cool.
to come visit. We have a superfood bar and smoothie, and we have a float tank, and it's everything between. But when it comes to learning in the future, they say we use what percentage of our potential. It was like, Einstein said 10%. Later on, Stanford University said 2%. I read recently it's 1/10,000th of 1% that you have enough brain power to last you a million lifetimes. It keeps on going down. I don't know if the 70s had something to do with it. But
certainly not the 60s.
I think we used like all our brain, but it's just how we use it. Right. And we're going to tap into more of that potential. I think the world opens up, because, between our ears, that device, this 3-pound, gray matter, it controls everything. But, we don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
It's still, when we're talking about, Patrick Stewart and Jean-Luc Picard, Star Trek, I really think that's that's the new undiscovered territory, and the mind's potential. So just an example. With what I do, our students can do, right? Whether it's names and faces and languages, everything. When it comes to reading, we routinely get people reading 2, 3, 4, 5 times faster than when they started. And I don't just mean traditional speed reading, for example. Traditional speed reading is scanning or skipping words, getting the gist of things, and our students, if you will, are they're entrepreneurs. They're students in school. They're doctors. You don't want the doctor getting the gist of what she's reading, right? So it's possible. All that is possible, and a lot more. And I'm really excited about where it's going, because I think success breeds success. I think never before has there been a need for this, because in this age of information, I think if you're stressed right now, if anyone listening to this or watching this is stressed that there's too much to learn but not enough time, do you know what I mean? It's because it's not your fault. And what I mean by that is we all grew up with this 20th century education. If we're talking about this ideal future, let's get a little perspective in terms of background to get the foreground. We grew up with the 20th century education, which prepared us for a 20th century world. It was literally an assembly line to work on assembly. It was assembly line education to work on an assembly line. Cookie cutter, one size fits all. And, sit quietly by yourself. Don't talk to your neighbor. But that's not the world we live in. The world we live in right now is electric cars and spaceships that are going to Mars. We work with, Elon Musk is a client, at SpaceX, 100 of his rocket scientists. And it's like, we have these electric cars, spaceships going to Mars, but how we learn is like a horse and carriage.
Right.
We still learn that way. That if Rip Van Winkle was to wake up, today, the only thing he would recognize is our school system. And that's not a slight, again, teachers. I love teachers. My mother's a school teacher, and my aunt is a teacher. It's just the system hasn't improved. And so the amount of information in the world is doubling at dizzying speeds.
Hmm.
But how we learn it, remember it, read it, it's the same. And that gap creates a lot of stress. So when we're talking about the health issues, it's huge for an individual or a team or an organization or a nation. Here's the stats. Like they call it, well, the terminology, they call it information fatigue syndrome,
Hmm.
information anxiety, higher blood pressure, compression of leisure time. Or if, so let's say something gets canceled and you have a free 30 minutes, people can't even enjoy that time because their mind is still where?
Right.
Multitasking, right?
Yeah.
Or sleeplessness. It's an epidemic right now. People not getting enough sleep. And this is from this information overload. Like, how many emails do you get a day? How
Right.
many read books do you have on your shelf? I mean, we live in this world of information, but it feels like we're taking a sip of water out of a fire hose.
Hmm.
And so, how do you close that gap? There's a real challenge. And we know, though, that lifelong learning is one of the big answers, is
Yeah.
because on the cover of Time magazine recently, they had these nuns, these super nuns. There was a longevity study, like we're talking about health, and like these nuns were living well into their 80s, 90, 100 and above. They
Hmm.
wanted to find out what was the secret. Half of it they decided was on their gratitude and their faith emotionally, and their emotional intelligence and connection. But the other half had to do with, they were lifelong learners. I mean, they
Cool.
would challenge their brains.
Yeah.
They would have deep conversations. They would play games and crossword puzzles and all this other stuff. So keep your brain alive would actually, add years to your life, and also life to your years.
Yeah.
Which is really huge. And can you imagine people living longer and living better and be able to keep their mental facilities, as they grow older? Because the truth is, you can. That you could create through neurogenesis, you could create brain cells until the day you die.
Hmm.
Neuroplasticity, Einstein's brain wasn't any bigger than anyone else's. If anything, it was a little bit less, but he had so many connections. Because every single time you have a thought or you move your body in a certain way, you make a new connection. And those connections, that's your intelligence. That's your learning. That's neuroplasticity. Right. So imagine a world where everyone's connected.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more, because we're running out of time here, about I'm fascinated by the motion connection. There's a lot of research around why exercise is good for not just your body, but especially your brain. It's kind of like this hard reset that allows you to learn in a different way and make these connections. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, so the tweetable, if you will, or the guiding principle is, as your body moves, your brain grooves. As your body moves, your brain grooves. People,
At Jim Kwik.
you're so good. KWIK. So here's the thing, and I like that also. Also, I mean, the social that you have, with your platform, that's just being active. One of the reasons why people are slow learners is they're passive. We learned back in school just to sit quietly and just consume information. That doesn't cut it anymore. You have to create.
Yeah.
Learning is not a spectator sport. At Jim Kwik. Not a spectator sport, because when we get involved in, just like working out, what we put in is what we get out. So taking notes or being live on social and sharing what you learn, really, really quick. 4 keys to faster learning. 4 keys. This is worth it right here. 4 fast keys to learning any subject or any skill faster. F is forget. Forget what you already know about the subject. You want to study health, set aside what you already know, temporarily what you know about it, so you can empty your cup, so you can put something else new in there. Otherwise, as we grow older, we feel like we know everything. We don't learn anything. That's why kids have empty cups, learn fast. So forget. Also forget about your limiting beliefs, and forget about stuff that's going on, around focus, right? The A in fast is active. Exactly that. Take notes, ask questions, the podcast, share it with people. The S in fast is state. And then this goes back to your body. And I always kind of teach in nested loops. S is state. The state is just the current mood of your mind and your body. And that's key to learning. Because if people learn in a dull, bored state, that emotion tied to information doesn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have high emotion tied to information, it becomes a long-term memory. Now, how do you control your state? Through your mind and your body, through your thoughts and through your physiology, right? So you can control your focus by the questions that you have. And the other way of changing it, getting back to the body, is moving your body. Like, you can sit in a posture, and breathing actually affects your state, which puts you in a more receptive, because you're this antenna that could pull in more information faster, right? And especially brainwave states, alpha and theta states. We were talking before this, before we started this conversation about like float tanks and meditation. All of that affects your brainwave states. Anyway, as your body moves, your brain grooves. So a couple examples. Recently, there was a study a couple years ago at Oxford University, and they found out that jugglers have bigger brains. Now, amazing. Why? Like, why is that? They actually found that jugglers actually create more white matter. And so, learn how to juggle. Go on YouTube and learn how to juggle fast. The other reason why juggling is really good for your brain is for reading. For people that want to read faster, if you're listening and watching this one, read faster is when you're juggling three balls, and you only have two eyeballs, you can't focus on every single one of the balls. You have to have this. You look forward and you have this soft gaze, relaxed gaze, and that allows you to take more of your environment. And that's a similar gaze that you want to have when you're reading. So you take in more words, right? So juggling. The other thing is, when I teach people to read, I teach a couple quick tips. I teach them to use their hand when they read. So for example, using your finger when you read will actually boost your reading speed 25 to 50% across the. So for example, and test it. I'm not the expert. You are the expert, listening to this. Read for 60 seconds, count the number of lines you just read in your book, go back and just underline it. Don't skip anything. Just underline it using a pen, pencil, highlighter, mouse, your finger. Count the number of lines you read the second time, that number will be 25. It'd be a 25, 50% jump. Yeah. And that's a needle mover. People like the 50%, that would actually be reading. The average person has to read about 4 hours a day, emails, texts, journals, books, newspapers, whatever. If you could just cut that in half and save 2 hours a day,
right?
That's how many hours out a year? I mean, even if you just save 1 hour a day over the course of a year, 365 hours,
right?
That's 9 40-hour work weeks. Just take that in. 2 months you get back saving 1 hour a day just reading, right? So using your finger, boost it. It's visual pacer, they call it, because your eyes are attracted to motion. But it's also your neurology. Certain senses work really closely together. Yeah. Like if you're ever eating a peach, you're not actually tasting the peach, you're smelling the peach. Mm-hmm. Your sense of smell and taste are so closely linked. So is your sense of sight and your sense of touch. That literally when people are reading with their finger, they feel more, they'll say, in touch with their reading. And if people lose their sense of sight, how do they read? With their sense of touch, right? So using your finger while you read. But what I teach people also is to use, which hand do you think I recommend people use, left or right, when they read? I actually recommend people use their left hand. And the reason why is when we look at the anatomy of the brain, you have this, triune brain and your neocortex, your high-level brain is the left side and the right side. And just as a super simplification, oversimplification. Your left brain is logic, words, sounds, but your right side is imagination, creativity. It's art, it's emotion, right? It's the experience. And so, good readers or average readers, they say the words in their mind on the left-hand side. But great readers, are more right brain or more whole brain. They'll not just hear the words, they'll experience the words. Mm-hmm. And what we found, because I've been teaching it this way for over 20 years, that by using your left hand, that we know that in high school biology, that one side of your brain controls the opposite side of your body, right? And God forbid, if you know anyone who had trauma here, if there's a paralysis or anything that manifests, it would be on the opposite side. Mm-hmm. But what we're finding out more recently is that it's not just a brain-body connection, it's a body-brain connection also. It works both ways. Yeah. And that by using your left hand can actually activate more of your right brain, which allow you not just to say the words, but really experience the words, which is totally different. Yeah. There's studies done by Dr. Lawrence Katz. He worked with seniors and wanted to find out how do you keep these seniors' brain alive, as they grow older, the agility, the focus, the memory, if you will. Came up with just a series of exercises, physical exercises, as we talked about, brushing your teeth with the opposite hand or eating with the opposite hand, closing your eyes, sometimes doing simple activities to be able to tap into, other sensory systems and such. Mm-hmm. It goes wide and deep.
Yeah. I can personally attest to the power of the left hand thing as a musician, especially because whenever I find myself a little bit rattled or you can tell that you're in the wrong brain state, when you're too anxious and you're just kind of in the wrong type of mood, I'll oftentimes just go and improvise on the guitar, a saxophone, or maybe piano using both hands it only takes about 3-4 minutes. And then you kind of kick into, like you said, with a soft gaze. It almost feels like that with your whole brain when you're in that flowing state. And it's incredible. And then I'll go read. So like if I wasn't in the mood to read before that, then it's like, okay, I can do it now.
Best readers I find, anecdotally, and we test tens of thousands of people, every single year. They tend to be women, mm-hmm. Because this has to do with communication between left and right brain. They have less
brain damage than men.
this may be true. The second thing is they tend to be left-handed. They would say left-handed people are in the right mind, if you will. And the third thing, they tend to be musically inclined.
Cool.
Especially if they're playing instruments that require, dexterity, using both hands and both sides of their brain. It's a powerful thing.
It's so cool. Yeah, that's what I wrote my first book about, called The Musical Brain. So if you guys are interested in that sort of thing, check that out. But Jim, where can people find you?
All over social media.
At Jim Kwik.
At Jim Kwik at Facebook or Instagram or on Twitter. I have this photograph of it's actually right there. There's this picture. I'll show you in a second.
Okay.
The 2-minute story on it.
Yeah.
Is I did a brain training for the chairman of 20th Century Fox.
Cool.
And it was for him and his officers. And for some reason, it just was my best. Maybe walk into the boardroom and I saw these Titanic and Avatar and Star Wars posters put me as a kid. And I think everyone could benefit from just that childlike, connection to themselves, that genius, if you will. Anyways, the best presentation I ever did. And afterwards, it was a Friday, the second half of the day, he just kind of walked me around the studio and just gave me this private tour. And I saw this movie poster of Wolverine. And I was like, wow, I love Hugh Jackman. I was like, I can't wait to see this movie. It wasn't coming out for a couple months. And he picks up his phone. And 5 minutes later, I'm in this beautiful theater with 3D glasses watching Hugh Jackman take on all these super ninjas. He comes to get me afterwards. He was like, how's the movie? And I was like, man, it's like, and I was still a kid. So I was like, I loved it. It was great. It's like, you don't know this. I was opening up more and more because I was just in state, remember learning states. And I was like, you don't know this, but I had these learning challenges growing up and it took me 2 years to learn how to read. But the biggest thing was, I learned by reading comic books to learn how to read. And I would stay up late at night when my parents thought I was sleeping. And my favorite comic books were the X-Men, which Wolverine and the X-Men. Yeah. And the reason why is because, not that they were strongest, but they just didn't fit in. And I felt like growing up, Abel, I didn't fit in. I had a lot of friends and the big thing, because I thought I was broken, when you feel like you can't learn, you're not smart enough, you don't connect a lot. And the other thing was but the big moment, it was when I was 7 years old, 8 years old, I read in one of the X-Men comic books that the X-Men School of the Gifted, where they trained them all, was in Westchester, New York. And I lived in Westchester, New York. So I'm telling the chairman, I was like, every weekend I would get on my bike and I would ride around my nneighborhood trying to find the X-Men school. That's awesome. And he was like, Jim, I didn't realize you like X-Men and superheroes. Do you want to go to Comic-Con? And I was like, Comic-Con in San Diego. Yeah. People. My wife's a former professional video gamer, so we've been to our fair share. We get along. So what happens is, he was like, you want to go to Comic-Con? And I was like, when is it? He's like, today, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then automatically I go from an 8-year-old Abel to an 88-year-old. I'm like, it's traffic and I have meetings and I'm going to wait on lines. But he was like, Jim, I'm going tomorrow morning. You want to go? I'm like, oh, you're going? Yeah, I want to go with you. So he picks me up the next morning, 8:00 Saturday, and we get on a plane. And it's, when I get on the plane on the Fox jet, it's the entire cast of X-Men. Oh my God. Could you imagine? I mean, because I'm just geeking out. It's like, I see Wolverine and Professor X. I don't even see Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman. I see Wolverine. And right. I'm sitting between Halle Berry and Jennifer Lawrence. And I'm just thinking, whoa, this is not even happening. Yeah. We spend the entire day at Comic-Con. We come back. Chairman asked, how's your day? And I was like, man, this was incredible. Thank you so much. He was like, well, I have something else for you. I'm like, oh, I don't want anything else. This is the greatest gift ever. He was like, yeah, but the cast, they really loved you. It's like, how would you like to go on set? I was like, what do you mean? I was like, X-Men, Days of Future Past. We have another 30 days or so of filming. Yeah. I'm like, whoa, yeah, I totally want to do that. I was like, but what can I do for you? He's just like, oh, just train them, speed reading scripts, memorizing lines, being focused and concentrated on set. I'm like, oh, I could totally do that. Yeah. Next morning, we're on the plane again, going from LA to Montreal, and we're just giving brain tips and sharing with the cast and crew. And I got to spend every single day over the course of the week there on set, 12 hours a day, watching, as a 7-year-old, my superheroes come to life. Wow. It was huge. Yeah. But here's the lesson in the story and the climax. When I got back home, there was a package waiting for me, and it was the size of a plasma TV. And I unwrap it, and it's this photograph. If you follow me on Facebook, it's my cover photo. But I don't know if you can see this. I know if you're listening. We'll put it in the show notes for sure. Oh man, that is so awesome. This, me and the entire cast of X-Men. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, it's just my cover photo on Facebook. But and the note on it, Abel said this from the chairman. The note said, Jim, thank you so much for sharing your superpowers with us. I know you've been looking for your superhero school. Here's your class photo.
Oh my God. That is so sweet.
Yeah, what a class act.
Yeah.
And just the lesson from that is I think that came from just that childlike place where you're just there and you're engaged, and anything is possible.
Yeah.
But the other thing is the lesson that I leave people with is this, when it comes to learning, is the premise for people who haven't seen the movie really quick is Patrick Stewart is Professor X, the leader of the X-Men, the brainiac, if you will. It takes place in the future, and it's a really bleak, dark future. And he sends Wolverine back in time to talk to the younger Professor X, to him as a younger version, to give him advice on how to fix the future, basically. Yeah. And
he doesn't want to hear it.
And here's the thing I would say to people, listening to this is, if you could go back in time and give the younger self some kind of advice, what would that be? What does the younger version of yourself need to hear, like right now? And I would say project yourself in the future, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And we have this imagination, and I believe imagination is power. I think it's the ultimate superpower, if you will. And so that we teach ourselves self-coaching. And so imagine you're in the future, you're in your future self, and you are that person, that what I call the superhero you, Y-O-U, that version of yourself that you're just really proud of, that you were tapping your potential. And you're looking back a year or two, like right now. And what advice would you give yourself right now at this moment? And just kind of let that dwell and let that kind of sink in a little bit.
Awesome. Think about that, folks. That's a really, really good one. Because if you have too much email now, imagine 5 years from now.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
The best way able to connect is either on social media, or if anyone's interested in any of our trainings, we're at kwiklearning.com. We have some of the most advanced programs in accelerated learning and speed reading and memory improvement. And that would be it.
Once again, this is Jim Kwik, and I'm Abel. Thank you so much for joining us on this. I think people are really going to like this show.
Oh, Abel, this has been a real pleasure. I respect you so much, and I enjoy listening to your podcast.
Thanks,
Congratulations on the book, and thank you everyone for listening. I really wish your days be full of lots of life and lots of laughter, lots of love, and always lots of learning.
Beautiful. All right, take care.